It doesn't work for everybody. We are not the right place for some people. But when you really put a lot of energy into the hiring process and then training, if I had to point to one thing, is hiring the right people over the years and having a fantastic team that surrounds me has really been responsible for a lot of our success.
That's Michael McCready, managing partner at McCreadyLaw. From a single office to more than 4 states and 100 employees, he's built one of the most forward-thinking plaintiff firms in the country by turning law into leadership.
Some people might think that I'm lucky, but the harder that I work, the luckier I got. You have to be a good lawyer. You have to know what you're talking about and how to handle the cases. The next skill is how to be good with clients. And that's completely different than being a good lawyer.
In this episode, he shares how data, discipline, and clear metrics became his firm's competitive edge, transforming gut instinct into a scalable operating system for growth.
These lawyers that tell me, oh, I don't think AI is safe yet. I'm going to wait to see what happens. I don't want to be the first one out there. They're already so far behind that they're never going to catch up.
Michael's message is clear. The future of law belongs to those who adapt. From automation to AI, he's proving that embracing change isn't risky anymore. It's required. Stick around. I'm Julien Emery, and this is the Scalable Law Blueprint. Welcome to the Scalable Law Blueprint, the show where we explore how modern law firms scale smarter, automate workflows, and deliver 5-star client experiences without burning out their teams. Each episode brings you impactful conversations with the innovators, operators, and legal tech leaders building the future of plaintiff law practice. From intake to impact, you'll learn how to build the systems and strategies that drive real growth. I'm your host, Julien Emery. Let's dive in. Maybe for the audience, it'd be great just to hear from your words a little bit about your background, your firm, and how you kind of got started in the space.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Julie, and looking forward to it. You are, one of those people that's in the industry that really knows what they're talking about when it's coming to technology and AI. And that's my background. So I am an attorney. I have offices in Chicago, Indianapolis, St. Louis, and Minneapolis. We've got 18 lawyers and a team of 125. I run a plaintiff's personal injury law firm throughout these states. And one of the ways that we're able to handle our cases as effectively as we do is through the use of technology. Technology is one of our core values at the firm. It has been for the 25 years that I've been running my firm. And it has just accelerated after the last couple years with the advent of AI and everything that keeps changing on what seems like a daily basis.
That's incredible. I want to get to the technology part and some of the ways you think about operations, but maybe taking a step back a little bit, even just to get to the size that you're at from the very time you started your firm, from the very early days. Is there anything that you did differently that gave you a competitive edge right out of the get-go that helped you get to where you are today?
Well, you know what? Some people might think that I'm lucky, but the harder that I work, the luckier I got. There was a lot of hard work that went into this and a lot of learning. So I like to look at my progression, and I think this is true for most entrepreneurial lawyers. First, you have to start out, you have to be a good lawyer, all right? You have to know what you're talking about and how to handle the cases. The next skill is how to be good with clients. And that's completely different than being a good lawyer. I know some lawyers who are fantastic with clients that, boy, I wouldn't trust them, with a misdemeanor case. But learning the law, learning how to be good with clients. The next step in the progression is learning how to operate a business. First just a mom and pop shop, and gradually it grows, and all the things that go into running a business, and now a multi-state corporation. And the next step that really turbocharged my growth was learning about marketing. Right. And these are all things they don't teach you in law school. So I really dove into all the different types of marketing, whether it's digital or traditional. And I had a very large client base, which we tap into and remarket. And then finally, where I am now, the top of the pyramid, so to speak, is building a law firm on culture and having it sustain and continue and to grow and have people who love what they do, are passionate for our clients. And that's once again a whole different skill set. So that's the progression that I went through, and I think that any lawyer that wants to grow a successful law firm probably has to follow those steps.
I think that's really impressive because you sort of start as a practitioner, and I think a lot of people aren't able to make that transition to thinking more like a business owner, a CEO, and thinking about all the other things they need to do. I'm curious, in that journey, especially when it sounded like there's one sort of maybe pivotal moment where you really started thinking about marketing more. Is there any other turning point or one turning point where you realize, wait, I gotta stop thinking like a good lawyer and start thinking like a business owner? Or is there anything that happened in the business that helped you turn that corner that I see so many other firms just kind of not able to turn? They're kind of stuck in their business.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to learn how to hire people and to train them and retain them. And listen, I've made a lot of mistakes over the years, and I learned a lot about hiring people. And I've got a fantastic team now. But my C-suite team, my higher level executive team, all really really strong A players, and that's not by accident. So most people just put a job posting out there, small personal injury law firm in search of XYZ, needs to be a self-starter, and blah 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 blah. And then they interview two or three people, and whoever aces the interview, they hire, and then they're stuck with them. So we spend a lot of time recruiting, making sure we're getting the right candidates, interviewing them, putting them through a lot of testing, make sure that they're a fit for us culturally. We want somebody that's going to be happy within our firm. It doesn't work for everybody. We are not the right place for some people. But when you really put a lot of energy into the hiring process and then training, okay, it's all well and good to hire a superstar and put them down in front of a computer, and they'll look at you and say, okay, what am I supposed to do? Because every law firm does things a little bit differently. So you've got to go through a training process. As we've grown, and we're a large firm now, we have an in-house full-time trainer. So every time we hire people, we have a trainer that walks them through a very, very specific process for each of the positions. Now, that's not something that you do when you're a smaller firm, but that's the way you need to think. So if I had to point to one thing is hiring the right people over the years. And that's, it can't be all me at this point. And having a fantastic team that surrounds me is really been responsible for a lot of our success.
That's excellent. That's really good. It's so critical. I feel like people overlook hiring and kind of often just do what's easiest and, go with, to your point, the first few interviews they get on, Indeed or some job posting or, their local net or their network, which works, but you kind of tap out your network pretty quickly. I'm curious on the training side, that makes a lot of sense. At what size were you in terms of number of people total in the firm when you made that hire to bring in an in-house trainer?
Probably about a year ago. So we were under 100, I don't know, 80, 90 people, somewhere like that. But even without a full-time trainer, it's important to develop the processes and create SOPs, standard operating procedures, for how you do things. People like to think that law is so complicated, and it can be, but a lot of what we do is routine every day. And there is a set way that things should be done on each case. And so documenting those and refining them then you have that manual that you can use for new hires, and that's the start of the training process. This is how we do things. When you hire someone, there is an onboarding process. There is something that needs to be done every single time. You write it out, even if it's on an Excel spreadsheet. Get a copy of the driver's license, have them sign their W-2 form or whatever it is, I-9 form, give them the information on health insurance, give them information on the 401k. If it's an attorney, make sure they're added to the malpractice insurance. So, when you write all these things down, anything that you have to repeat should be written down, plain and simple.
That makes total sense. Getting to sort of systems and processes and kind of going a little deeper on that, are there any particular systems and processes in certain areas of the business that have really impacted your ability to scale like you have? Or has it been just like across the board? Just curious, like what processes and systems have helped you scale the most?
Well, listen, law is really behind the times when it comes to most things. And there are most businesses, run their businesses on metrics, right? And law firms, by and large, don't. Well, I do. So, you start out with very, very simple metrics. Things that I've been tracking literally for 20 years is, where do my cases come from? What are my settlements? What's my average settlement? Just start with things like that. Because the more information that you have, the more data that you have, the more you can make informed decisions. So where do you start? You start with the real simple things, and then you can start looking at, what kind of data is important to help the profitability of the firm and help the clients, and you start tracking that. And then you start seeing what you can do to improve whatever those numbers are. So to me, it all starts with numbers. Now, although we have data and we track everything, it doesn't necessarily mean that we always make a decision based on the numbers. There are cases that we handle because it's the right thing to do, not because we're going to make money, because we've got a client that's really being screwed around by an insurance company, and it's the right thing to do. And, the numbers tell us, we shouldn't take that case because we're going to lose money or whatever. But when you have the numbers, you can at least make those informed decisions, and you'd be surprised at how better run any business, and a law firm in particular, will be when you have these numbers to look at.
That makes a lot of sense. I've talked to a lot of firms that they know some of their numbers, they don't know all of their numbers, they look at different numbers. You talked about where cases come from, average settlements. Do you look at sort of every detailed number every day? Or I'm just curious, what's your day-to-day like, or week over week? Are there one or two KPIs or metrics, or a top 5 that you're looking at all the time and you're sharing with your team and the whole team's looking at?
I mean, as the managing partner, I'm looking at intake every day. I want to see, the number of leads, the number of cases that are signed up, and the facts of those cases. I'm also looking at settlements each day, because I need to keep my finger on the pulse of the firm. So, for example, if we have 100 leads, I know we're going to sign up about 30 of those. Historically, we sign up about 30% of our leads. Out of those 30 cases, we are going to withdraw no fee from about 20%. These are cases that we've signed up that upon further investigation, we find out there's no liability, there's no insurance, or for whatever reason. And we refer out about 10%. So out of those 30 cases we sign up, 3 get referred out, 6 we drop. So we're going to settle 21 cases. So if we have 100 leads, we're probably going to get fees on about 21 cases. I also know how many cases each of my team members can handle. So, for example, a case manager's caseload should be a certain number of cases. So if I see leads coming in and I see signups increasing, I need to make sure that we have enough capacity for case managers. And we want to look at that going forward. We don't want to be caught shorthanded and all of a sudden have all these new cases and no case managers. Same thing is when the cases are signed up, and if there's an increase, I need to look down the road for medical records, because at some point we're going to need medical records for all these people. I need to look at attorneys to handle them. But if you have a handle on your numbers, you can project these things. Now let's look at the other number is settlements. I need to know what my cash flow is going to be. And I need to know and look forward to what I'm going to have to spend to handle all of these cases. So if there's an increase in cases right now, it's going to cost me money to handle them before the fees come in. So I'm always kind of projecting to have an idea of where we are financially. And that's what I do as a managing partner, is really keep my finger on the pulse of the firm.
I love that. It's this delicate balance of, what's coming in the door, net new cases, which is going to cause us to increase our cost potentially, or maintain our cost to work these cases. And then what's the revenue we're getting coming in. And that is a delicate balance. I like your perspective there. All right, we'll get back to the show in 1 second, but real quick, what if you could scale your law firm without adding more chaos? With SuperPanel, you can. It automates intake workflows, follows up with clients, and collects evidence automatically, freeing your team from repetitive tasks and helping you grow with confidence. If that sounds like the kind of system your firm can use, scan the QR code or click the link in the show notes to see how it works. Now let's get back to the conversation.
With all the metrics in the firm, what I like to think of myself as, if you've ever seen inside a recording studio where they have a mixing board and they've got all these slides, and the producer or the engineer can move this slide up and move this slide up and balance everything. That's what I look at my job, right? I'm continuously balancing out these things, and if one metric goes up, I need to adjust the other metrics to keep everything in balance. There are times that we get too many cases, and so I will have to adjust that, and maybe we'll cut down on some advertising spend, or we'll tell the intake team, be a little bit more particular about the cases that you sign up. In intake, I have this metaphor: is intake is like a fisherman, and they cast this big wide net, and you pull it all in, and you see what you get. But sometimes it depends on how wide the holes are in the net. So if you have a really tight net, you're gonna pull in a lot of stuff. So there are times, if we're slow, I tell them, tighten up the net, and maybe we get some cases that we might not have taken if we were busy, or let's let some of those little fish go through the holes and not worry about those because we're so busy. But that's what my role is as a managing partner, is to see the 10,000 foot view.
I get this sense of like there's like a pulse and a feeling in a company. It's like an organism that you can kind of feel. And I love hearing you talk about it, because I can just sense how deeply sort of integrated and connected you are to this whole organism and kind of feeling of what's coming in, what's coming out. And I think that's how businesses should be run. Like, I think that's the best way to build companies.
Talk to a lot of folks, and I'm more than happy to share what I do and how I've gotten there. But you can't expect all of a sudden to be like McCready overnight. This took me 25 years, and we're constantly changing and evolving and improving. But there are fundamental steps that anyone can take. And then once you start understanding and you start seeing the way that a law firm operates as a business, then you can take those new steps. But you have to take the baby steps first, and always try to improve.
Typically, what are those baby steps? Like when you look at other firms, and I know you chat with other firms and see other firms, various events and things like that. If there's call it a 5 to 15 person firm, not attorneys, but just like people, and they're trying to go to the next level, like what is typically the most common barrier that you see, and what steps, or like maybe the first two baby steps you think they ought to take? on average?
Yeah, I can really only speak towards plaintiff's personal injury, but some of these things, translate to other practice areas. But some of which I've already talked about. You need to know where your cases are coming from, because if your phone's not ringing and if you're not signing up cases, your firm's not going to make it. So always pay attention to where your cases come from, and always look for new opportunities for cases. Everybody at your law firm should be telling everybody that they know that they work for McCready, right? Whether they're at their kids' swim meet or baseball practice, your team, the people that work for you, should be your greatest advocates. And then whatever other means that you use to bring in cases. So you gotta watch where the cases are. We have an intake department. I always recommend a non-attorney serve as the initial intake person. I could go on for a long time why, but the numbers definitely show that a non-attorney initial intake person is much better than an attorney. So that's another thing that I recommend. And then you need to look at what's called time on desk, how long it's taking you to handle these cases. You should try to move cases along as quickly as you can without sacrificing quality. But the longer cases drag out, the longer it is before you get paid. So look at those, and then look at your average fee, and then analyze your cases as to what you can do to increase that average fee. There's basically only three ways that you can increase profit in a law firm. One is get more clients, two is cut costs, or three is increase your average fee. I mean, that's it. So, that's the recipe for growth. And each of them you can examine and constantly look at to increase the revenue of the firm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's interesting because those baby steps are kind of thinking like a business owner all of a sudden, switching to thinking about where your case is coming from, what are your numbers, how long are you working these cases. I love that answer. You talked about intake a little bit. I just wanted to double click on that, and specifically, yeah, you mentioned having someone who's not a lawyer do intake. I don't always see that at some firms. Why is that so important from your perspective? And also, just in general, when it comes to intake, like what have you noticed maybe is most important in intake to hit certain conversion rates? Like what are some best practices or most common areas that people get wrong with intake?
All right, so here's why I don't recommend lawyers doing intake. Okay, this is a typical lawyer intake. Okay, you were in an accident. Okay, you went to the hospital. Okay, when can you come in? Well, no, I don't have time to talk about your broken cell phone. When can you come in? I mean, that's all we care about. Whereas somebody, I don't have time. I mean, it's not that I don't care. It's a case. I want to sign it up. I want to move forward. Second is lawyers have a tendency to overanalyze cases and look for the faults and look for the reasons to decline them. We never think in, yes, no, black and white. So having a non-attorney do intake. I don't need an attorney to say that a rear end accident with injuries is a case that I want to sign up, right? My intake team, they can said, what is the key? The key is empathy. And lawyers, tend not to be the most empathetic. Now they can put on the veneer of empathy when they're in front of a jury, but their mind is running a million miles an hour. They're analyzing the facts of the case and everything. So my intake team, they take the time to listen and talk to the potential caller. Now, remember, I told you that we only sign up about 30% of the cases, which means 70% of the people we're declining. Maybe it's not a personal injury case. Maybe it's not a case that we handle. Maybe there's no liability. But my intake team is talking to every single one of them and spending a couple minutes on the phone. And guess what? Those 70% of the people that we decline are thankful. We get 5-star reviews from cases that we don't take. and they go into our database, we remarket to them, and I can't tell you the number of people that we have declined who have come back to us afterwards. So, my intake team, by taking a couple minutes and explaining, well, you know what, I really appreciate the fact that you called me, but because you hit the car, you rear-ended the car in front of you, we can't make a recovery, okay? It has to be someone else's fault. And, if you get rear-ended or if you get hurt at work or, please feel free to give us a call. We're here all the time to answer your questions. Lawyers don't have time to do that, to have those conversations. And then also, we have got intake screening criteria. So yes, non-attorneys can be trained to decide what cases that we take and which ones we don't. Now, we do have attorneys that are available at all times if an intake specialist doesn't know whether it's a case or not. They'll talk to one of our attorneys and decide whether to take it. Or if it's a very, very serious case, or if the client absolutely wants to talk to an attorney, yes, we have an attorney available. But and finally, intake is very, very easy to keep track of your metrics and your numbers. Notice I knew off the top of my head, out of every 100 leads, we're signing up 30, and we track our want rate. So for every lead that we have in, how many of them did we want? And then how many did we sign? That's the conversion rate. Then we look at how many cases did we sign that generated a fee. These are all really easy numbers to track. And when you have more than one intake person and you have enough data, I know that 30% is where we should be at. So if we have an intake specialist that's signing up 45% of the cases, we can look at that and say, I think you should be a little bit more careful about signing up some of these cases. Or if we've got someone who's signing up 20% of the cases, well, maybe you should be signing up a few more. And when you have enough data, you can come up with some pretty good numbers. If you're a med mal firm, your want ratio is probably under 5%. There are just not a lot of viable med mal cases. If you're a work comp firm, your want rate is probably much higher because they got hurt on the job, and that's a want. So that's my analysis. And then and this is maybe a good time to pivot to what we're doing with AI. So we record all of our phone calls and we transcribe them, and we've built out an AI system that analyzes each of those phone calls and grades each of those phone calls on empathy, on explaining things to the client, by explaining the contract, by not rushing them, and each intake call is graded. And then in real time, our AI is telling them suggestions on what would have made that phone call better.
That's outstanding.
And we're doing this, now in real time. My goal is to have, the best intake team around, because that's the first impression that people get of your law firm is your intake. So we're looking at using technology in all these different ways, and intake is definitely a good place to start.
That's a really great point. And also just thinking about the metrics that you're describing, maybe if you can just double click on how you think about the use of technology to run your business, whether it be for metrics, for recording things, and technology can be AI technology or not technology. Like, how do you view sort of the operations of plaintiff firms 3 to 5 years from now, and how will sort of technology, do you think, change that, keep it the same, improve it?
Well, Julien, 3 to 5 years from now, I can't even tell you 6 months from now.
Okay? Yeah, fair enough.
Things are changing so quickly. It's evolving, in a pace that we've never seen before. I've always been at the forefront of technology, and technology, to my mind, has been largely automation, doing things internally, automated. If the process is always A, B, C, and D, well, let's get rid of B and C and get them done automatically. If something is done this way every single time, that's an automation. Whether it's templates, right? I mean, we rarely write a custom letter anymore. Everything is by templates, and they're all generated at certain times. So that's technology that's been around for a long time. That's what's gotten my firm to be able to be so efficient. But the technology that's coming out today is leapfrogging that. So most of the technological benefits over the last 5 or 10 years have all revolved around case management systems. And these are systems that help you run your practice. In my experience, not many people use their case management system to its fullest potential. You could use Microsoft or Google, for contacts, for your calendar, and for your documents. A case management system is so much more if you use it and if you build it out. So that's where technology has been. But where AI is now and where it's going is allowing, and I use AI in air quotes, but AI will be able to analyze your cases in real time and be able to tell you what needs to be done. And very soon we'll be able to do it. So, for example, if we send discovery out, let's go beyond the fact that AI already sends our discovery out. But once the discovery is out, and after 28 days, in a case management system, there would come a task. Follow up defense counsel. It's late. Well, with AI, those tasks go away. Is in your inbox is a letter to defense counsel saying that your discovery is overdue. It knows that it was overdue. It generated the letter, and the only thing you need to do with all AI is to proof it and send it. My thoughts on AI in terms of where it's going. We've been using case management systems for years, and they're very effective. But I think that AI is going to leapfrog case management systems because AI is going to know what to do without you having to program it and to create these processes within the case management system. And you're literally going to have a data repository that your AI is going to access and give you exactly what you need when you need it. The technology's not there yet, but there are a lot of companies, yourself included, that are really pushing the envelope in trying to get there with AI.
It sounds like what you're describing, and I totally agree with you. Not just in law, but across all industries, really, is this shift from I sort of describe it as moving from an era of software as a service to service as software, where the software is now doing work instead of just being sort of the repository of the work and the data. That's kind of what you're describing, right? Is like that it's now autonomously figuring out what to do and maybe drafting an action and asking you to double check it or whatever it might be. I won't just say AI, I'll just say as technology moves towards greater and greater execution of work, accuracy matters, right? Doing work, AI executing work in the context of a law firm, accuracy matters a lot. Just curious if you have any thoughts or learnings in based on everything you've adopted, everything you've done in terms of using new products where AI is executing work just to make sure it's accurate. Like, how do you think about this in terms of just adopting this technology in such a way to make sure it is of high quality and, isn't making errors? Kind of curious how you think about that.
The best practices for AI all revolve around data integrity, okay, and what data the AI system is accessing. And almost all of our systems are entirely enclosed within my environment, and I know that my environment is pristine data. They talk about, hallucinations and case law. I would never use AI to, write a brief, especially without checking it. But guess what? We've got 25 years worth of legal briefs that we've done. Well, that's our database. Okay, because we wrote those briefs the old-fashioned way, and now we can, have AI access them, take the facts of our case that we're working on, use our database of all of our briefs that we've done in the past to do a first draft. And it's great. The problems that you run into is that by the simple nature of an LLM, or a large language model, is it's predictive. It's predicting what you want. And that's where the possibility of hallucinations comes in. But if you lock down the data that you're using and that you're allowing the LLM to access, you're going to get much better results. And that's what we've been focusing on for the last year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah, I'm always curious to just see how people are thinking about it, because what I find fascinating is, when you're hiring people make mistakes, right? And as you're scaling up, there's a certain amount of mistakes baked into the system. And so we kind of have this known process of doing quality assurance and supervision on people's work and then training people. And there's sort of like this emerging role job function to do quality assurance and supervision on AI work. And I don't think it's any different. It's just like this sort of a new standard operating procedure of doing this. And I'm always kind of curious how firms have been, figuring that out.
Yeah, listen, we have an obligation. We have an ethical obligation to our clients to produce the best quality legal output that we can. But according to the ABA, and I agree with this, we also have an ethical obligation to stay informed of new technology. And that is an ethical obligation that lawyers should become familiar with and use AI. And then, of course, be very aware of the confidentiality issues, the data privacy issues, the inherent bias baked into most LLMs. All of these things are required, ethically required, to be an attorney these days. So, these lawyers that tell me, oh, I don't think AI is safe yet, and I'm going to wait to see what happens, and, I don't want to be the first one out there, they're already so far behind that they're never going to catch up. Forget about law firms like mine that are really, really using AI to, a lot. Even these firms that are using it a little bit are using outside vendors, right? Like SuperPanel or some of these other, vendors that are out there. These firms are already ahead of their competitors who aren't using AI. I like to use this historical analogy is, when I started out as a lawyer, lawyers would say, I don't need the internet. I've got a brochure. I get all my clients from my brochure. And guess what? The people that had websites, started doing better. And then the same lawyers would say, well, I've got a website. I don't need SEO. Everybody's going to find me. Well, yeah, you need SEO. And the firms that were at the forefront of SEO are still at the forefront, and no one's going to catch them. And then, oh, I don't need social media. Yeah, you do need social media. And if you're not doing it, the firms that are already ahead of you, and you'll never catch up. And now there's AI. So anyone who wants to just sit back and see what happens, you're never going to catch up, especially at the pace that is going on with AI.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Those are good analogies. I've talked to some folks that have been working in the industry for a very long time that have told me some similar stories. Like, I don't need a website. Like, why would I? Everything has worked so far without a website. And it sounds like this sort of inherent adaptability and curiosity and high velocity of learning is something that you just inherently have or worked at and have instilled in your firm. And so I think that's so important. I totally agree with you there. Just jumping around kind of back to a topic we touched on earlier. I'm just curious, when you talked about hiring and all the importance of hiring and how you look for people, You also talked about your leadership team. I'm curious, like what does your leadership team look like, and how do you decide what roles exist on your leadership team? Can you kind of walk through that?
Yeah, so I've got some people that have come up with me, right? They might have started when we had 30 people at the firm, and now we're four times that. So they have grown, and then have other people that we've brought in as we've got larger. I think though the key is you have to have a nurturing environment. It's got to be a two-way street. So I need to be able to trust them to do what their job is. And report back to me without me micromanaging. And then likewise, I need to give them the authority, and also the whole team needs to know that my executive team, I support them. I've had this conversation. I may disagree with you in private, but I will never contradict you in front of the team. So everybody knowing that I have entrusted, my leadership in these people, whether it's, the director, my intake supervisor or the case manager supervisor, settlement paralegal supervisor, litigation paralegal supervisor, and then my bookkeeping team and my HR team, my marketing team. And then, of course, I've got my firm administrator, and she's at the top of all of this. So going back to my point on culture, it's the combination of all of this. So it's me leading at the top with my vision and our mission, and it going down to the executive team and the leaders, who have to be the ones that are communicating with the people that are doing the work. I've grown too big. I can't supervise or be actively involved in every single person's position in the firm. And so either training someone to be a leader or bringing them in from the outside has been key to our ability to continue to scale.
That's great. The culture piece is so important. Great to hear that you're thinking about that and talking about that.
With culture, what is culture? I wish that I could bottle it up. I wish I could write a book and sell it. It's really hard to put your finger on. It's a lot of little things, and those little things add up. It's making people enjoy coming to work, not just doing the work, but being empowered and giving them the power to handle situations. It's how you address issues within the firm, and then it's the little things. In the 4 offices that we have, we had an Easter egg hunt. This was not my idea. All right, this was someone else's, and it went over so well. We've got some international team members, Ramadan. And so, of course, we made sure that everybody understood what Ramadan was, these little kind of things. We give shout outs all the time to people. We publicize anniversaries, how long people have been there at the firm, and birthdays. The communication between each other. I have my wine education certification, so I hosted a wine tasting for the whole firm. And I gave the shopping list to the 3 other offices. They went out and bought it, and we did it all on Zoom. So part of it is team building. Part of it is how you treat everyone. We have a very, very we do not have a hierarchical team. The only thing that separates the lawyers from the people who, take out the trash is we went to school longer, right? So we're no better than anyone else. I like to tell people the quickest way to get fired in the firm is to say, that's not my job, because it's everybody's job. So, all these things contribute to it. We have our monthly meeting by Zoom. We have everybody on the Zoom. A month or 2 ago was Employee Appreciation Day. Gosh, if you're not doing something for Employee Appreciation Day, I mean, that's as low-hanging fruit as there is. How can you expect a team to believe in you when you didn't even pay attention to an Employee Appreciation Day? So, all these little things contribute to creating a firm-wide culture.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, what I'm getting out of all this is just this sort of shared set of behavioral and norms, and sort of ways to behave in certain situations that you've created that creates an environment that people want to work in and want to work well in. That's really fantastic.
The word that you're bouncing around are values. We have firm values, and they are everything that we do. So I already mentioned one is technology. That is a firm value. Another firm value is approachability. We want to break the stereotype of being stuffy lawyers. We're very serious about the work we do, but we don't take ourselves seriously. Another firm value is creativity. And another one is, technology, community, and diversity. These are firm values that we live by every single day. And when someone has a question about what to do, we can always tell them, look back at our firm values, and that should be able to give you the answer. We always do what's best for the client.
How do you screen for those values? Like technology and approachability are not the top things that come to mind when I think of a law firm. How do you screen for that and sort of instill those values when hiring and when building the culture?
Well, certainly, it's part of our interview process, and I don't do the hiring anymore. But for example, we would say, Julien, one of our firm values is approachability. We want clients to feel like that they can come and talk to us. A lot of people are intimidated by lawyers or law firms. A lot of people have never talked to a law firm. So if our firm values approachability, how would you handle a situation working for our firm? Right. So, but then it's really ingrained once we hire the people. We have a whole section on what our firm values are, what the vision is. We bring it up in all the firm meetings. The lawyers, it's part of their progression through the law firm. If you want to continue to grow through the law firm, you need to learn the firm values and you need to show the firm values because everybody's looking to you as the lawyers. And if you're not displaying the firm values, that's a serious problem. How can anybody else care if the boss or the lawyer or whoever isn't living these values every single day? So it all grows upon it and constantly referencing it.
That's fantastic. Michael, this has been so wonderful. There's so many nuggets of wisdom here for people to take away and learnings that I've had from this conversation. If anyone wants to connect with you, learn more from you, follow along the work that you're doing and that your firm is doing, what's the best way to connect with you or learn more?
Yeah, probably LinkedIn. I've got a personal page, Michael McCready, and then our firm page, McCreadyLaw. We're active on Instagram and Facebook too, but I don't really monitor those too much myself. LinkedIn, I see all the time. So that's probably the best way to reach out to me.
Perfect. I'll put your profile in the comments and we can wrap it right there.
Great. Thanks, Julien. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks for checking out the Scalable Law Blueprint. If today's conversation helped you think differently about how your law firm runs, share this episode with a colleague and don't forget to follow the show so you never miss what's next. To see how automation can transform your intake and operations, visit superpanel.io and discover how leading plaintiff firms scale with confidence. I'm Julien Emery, and I'll see you in the next episode.